So I think that there's like two different kinds of events, right? The Saigon Superfight event is like a Superfight show, right? That's an event that pretty much the only purpose behind that is to just get people matches, right? Help our friends get competitive experience.
Yep.
Very, very simple, like low key kind of event. But then you have the bigger tournaments, right? Which the goal of that is twofold, right? If you're running it, the goal of it is twofold. You still want to get people competitive experience, right? At the end of the day, we're not working in like finance. You're not making millions of dollars running jiu-jitsu tournaments, right? But you also still want to make money, and that's the second goal, right? So if you're running a jiu-jitsu tournament, I mean, at the end of the day, like you're committing time to something, right? And it's very difficult to do. So for instance, like I actually have defended the IBJJF in this respect in the past. So I'm not the biggest fan of certain things that the IBJJF does, but one thing that I'll defend is people are like, they're a for-profit business. Yeah, like what's the problem with that? They're running tournaments that you want to do. They're well run, they're on time most of the time, right? The refs are usually pretty well trained and they do a good job. What's the problem with them trying to make money with it? I would prefer that they make money with it so they have a reason to continue to host and run good events, right? I have no problem with that whatsoever. So the criticism of an event as being oh, it's done for profit, who fucking cares? If the athlete is getting something, an opportunity to compete and develop their skills, and the organizer is getting something, money, right? This is a win-win. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just think that criticism is really weak. And so, yeah, like that. But a thing like Saigon Superfights is the goal is not to make money, right?
Yeah, of course.
Just to help
Yeah,
grow
of
the
course.
sport.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And like at the end of the day, like if you're doing something like running an 80cc, like the guys in Malaysia, I'm sure their primary goal is to grow the sport in Malaysia, right? Now
Yes.
I'm sure they also want to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it's a good thing because it encourages them to continue to do it. Like I want them to continue to do it.
To do it more often.
To do it more often. I hope they make money. It's good for me. I hope they make a ton of money. I hope they make so much money they're like, let's do 5 of these a year. That's amazing for everyone in the region, right? Like so, yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is that it's like, what will grow the sport is like you just need as many people as possible involved with it, right? Yeah. And like it's kind of a tricky thing because you're both cooperating and competing, right? Like so it's like, okay, you've got to kind of all work together because at the end of the day, if you don't, there's no sport. But there's also competitive elements to it. And it's not even just competitive elements between the athletes. There's competitive elements between like, I'm not going to say names, but like, so for instance, in the past, I've competed on events and then rival events who I also competed for had problems with it. And I was like, guys, like what? I'm just an athlete. I'm just trying to do every competition I can. And like, people sometimes will, this tournament doesn't like this tournament, right? Like whatever, right? Like it's like, yeah. And it's like that stuff can emerge and it's almost inevitable to some extent, but the best thing is just, I don't have like a perfect solution to this, but it's like when you're trying to grow a sport in an area where it's not as developed out here. It's better if everyone is on good terms and growing it together, right? Like we all have the common aim of growing the sport. Yeah. So, yeah, because like, so for instance, like with Saigon Superfights, I'm sure we're going to have matchups. I don't know for sure, but I would guess we'll have matchups between guys at like Over Under and Arcane, right? And those are two gyms that I'm training at, and sometimes I teach at Arcane, I teach at Over Under sometimes, right?
Yep.
But it's they maybe those guys don't train with each other, right? Like so, it's like it's almost unavoidable, right? Like you've had matches with Hip, like you were talking about, right?
Hip, Vince, a bunch of my friends.
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of people at the higher belts, really.
But the more we grow it, the more we grow it,
Yeah.
the more people there will be, right? Like, yeah, like, so for instance, for me, like if I do certain divisions in certain countries, like Thailand, I definitely know some of the people who I'm going to be competing against. Like it's like, there's a guy named Denny Sisti. We had one match years ago. I'm sure we're going to compete again. And I like the guy. He's a really nice guy, but he's always in the divisions, right? So it's like, you see a lot of the same people, but the more the sport grows, the more we will see new faces, which is always a good thing. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling right now.
Oh, it's okay. But I mean, what are some creative ways that we can further Vietnam here, the grappling in Vietnam?
Yeah, we just have to have more events, you know,
Yeah.
more events. And a lot of it, I think, should be built around the local guys, right?
Yeah.
The Vietnamese guys, right? Like, let's say this is not an actual person. I'm just off the top of my head. Let's say there's a Danish purple belt living here, right? He gets a match on an event. It's not bad. Maybe he's living here. 6 months from now, he decides he wants to go back to Denmark. Okay, the progress, in a sense, has been lost with him, right? Whereas if the Vietnamese guys get matches, they're gonna most likely stay here, right? Okay, maybe some of them move, whatever, but it's more likely that they stay within the country, right? Like, did you guys see Dune 2?